Okay, so now we were dealing with area where we had to count squares, but now here it says find the area of each, and I have some measurements. Okay, so it's telling me some measurements. So let me understand, let me understand something really quick. So what I'm going to do, let me draw a rectangle. So let me do some explanation here for me to understand those numbers. So let's say I have a rectangle here. Let me draw a rectangle here because I know how to do rectangles when I can just count the squares. Okay, so now here I can count the squares. I can count them as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Okay, this was not too hard, right? When we counted, we learned the area is just square, so that's not that bad. Let's assume my top right is not crooked, okay? Let's assume that I have actual nice squares here. So the area of that will be 18. I learned how to count squares. Now, will you really want to count all the time? What if I give you a shape that has like 1,000 squares? I know we did some on the homework that were pretty big. On the notes, we did one that had even 225 squares. Do we really want to count all the time? Not necessarily. One thing we could say is, I see on the long side, it has 6 squares. So this 6 basically means how many squares would I have on the long side. And then here on the short side, I'm gonna say there's 3 squares. You guys see the 3 squares there. So that's what the measurements mean. So I could easily count here on my question number 5. I can make the squares. So it would be 6 one way, 6 the other way, bunch of squares. Question number 6, I can easily make them. There's 2 squared on the short side and 6 squares on the long side. I can easily do that. Now, the bad thing is that sometimes they're even decimals. We're going to deal with decimals. So instead, let me just say that some people might say, I like adding. Adding is pretty simple. So I can add this 3 plus this 3 because I'm not going to be counting by ones. I'm going to be adding by a bunch. So plus this 3. And then I'm going to add this 3, this 3, and this 3. And then you guys will be, that's 18, right? Because I don't want to be counting by ones. I'm going to be counting by threes. Fine, you can do that as well. But do you really want to count? Now, back in elementary, you guys learn repeated addition, right? When I'm adding the same number over and over and over. Isn't that what we call multiplication? So instead of going 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3, instead of adding 3 6 times, we can just multiply it. I can just go 3 times 6. I'm going to use the dot as a multiplication. I can easily just go 3 times 6 and I get my 18th. So notice how there's many ways how we can do area. I can literally count all the squares one by one. I could add them by groups of 3 in this case, or I can just multiply. Now you were told before it's base times height, but then somebody else said no, it's length times width. And then you might be like, well, which one is it? In reality, you're going to multiply the two numbers that meet at a corner, which like the length and width, we call it length and width when the rectangle is laying down. So we call it length and width. We call it base and height when the rectangle is standing up. Does it really make a difference? Not really. Just pick a corner of a rectangle, it doesn't matter which one, and just multiply the two numbers that meet at that corner. So like I said, I'm going to use the shortcut. I'm going to use multiplication instead. I'm going to choose this corner. I know this side right here, it is 6. And this side right here, it is 6. Again, you might be dealing with decimals. It's fine. We can deal with decimals. The two numbers that meet at that corner are 6 and 6. I'm just going to multiply them. 6 times 6. And my answer happens to be 36. Take a look at question number 6 here. I'm going to pick a corner. This side is 2. And this side is 6. So let me multiply these two numbers. I'm going to go 2 times 6. It happens to be 12. Now that was easy. Now going back into what we did before. Remember, we saw this yesterday. And then when I counted these squares, this rectangle, remember yesterday I told you guys I counted 15 squares. We could have counted 15 squares, or we could have just noticed that there were 5 squares this way, 3 squares this way. 5 times 3 is 15. So notice that's basically what we do. Again, we pick a corner and we multiply the two numbers that meet at that corner. If you're dealing with decimals, fine. Decimals are just numbers.